Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name's Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week we get back on our main quest line, which is us moving through the history of id Software vis-a-vis the book Masters of Doom by David Kushner. We're on chapter 9. So, Mike, where have we last left our heroes?
Okay, so they're working hard on Doom. All right, everyone's working on Doom. They know it's a
Hasn't
thing
come
they're
out
doing.
yet.
It hasn't come out yet. They're working on it. We're looking at like early 1993 right now. Okay, spring, you could say.
Okay.
And it was at this time that Carmack realized that he really wanted the game engine for Doom to go faster. Because you know what? That's what their whole point of Doom was. Like fast, brutal
Gotta go fast.
combat. Yeah. So he had, once again, another breakthrough among his many breakthroughs. So there was a thing in computing at the time, an idea called binary space partitioning, or BSP for short. And that is the process of breaking 3D models into large sections, or leaves of data, as they're called, instead of drawing like all of the little polygons individually. And Carmack wondered if he could apply BSP to his entire 3D world in Doom. And of course he could. And of course it worked.
Of course, because Carmack is a genius.
Exactly. So now instead of loading the entire tree when a player is in a level, it just loads what the player can see. Then that sped up the game once again. It's very similar to the idea of what he did with 2D side-scrolling. Like, tell the computer's putting everything in there, tell the computer to do just what the player sees, or just the side
or
right.
just the things
that's
that are
refreshing.
changing.
Yeah. So it's a similar idea, but this time we're looking at 3D. So that's what they're doing. Also, we have an update on Tom Hall. Remember, Tom Hall got let go at the end of the last area. He actually picked up a job at Apogee after leaving id Software. So
nice. So he still kind of works on Doom.
Yes, it was like, well, they don't work with Apogee anymore at this point.
Oh,
either.
that's true. Yeah, right. Yeah,
So
right.
it's like Tom and Scott Miller started a club of people that no longer work with id Software. That's what they did, which is nice, because there's other people still designing games at the time, and it's good. So, but what this meant for id is that they now needed a new game designer. Tom's gone. And the guy from the job they found that was most qualified, his name was Sandy Peterson. And Sandy was very, very different than all the id guys. All the id guys are in their early 20s. Sandy, 37 years old. Okay. Like, what is this? A computer dinosaur? What's happening? At 37? I say this fully knowing I am almost 33. And he's actually known for creating the game Call of Cthulhu, which is a very popular role-playing game. It was created by Sandy. Sounds perfect, right? Well, there was one problem with Sandy with Romero, and that is Sandy was Mormon. And Romero is like cool guy, rock star, metal guy, and he's like, we can't have this like Mormon guy on our team. He would like not want to do with all the violence and stuff. He'd want to like censor it down. And so
we got demons and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Demons aren't good. But yeah, so this actually led to a very uncomfortable conversation in the book where Romero just kept asking questions like, hey, you don't do that thing that all the Mormons do like this. And he's like, well, actually, I do that. And then just like did that like 4 times. But in the end, Sandy just says, hey, everything's okay. I have no problems with killing demons because they're the bad guys, is the exact quote that Sandy said. Yeah, which makes a lot of sense, Sure. It's like, yeah, they're the bad guys, and that's who you're fighting, so it's fine. And they get along great after that. There's actually a really funny moment in the book, too, between Sandy and Carmack, where, because it's at the time where like they're kind of negotiating Sandy as a game designer for id, and Sandy asked for more money from Jay because he wants to have money to support his family, and Carmack said, quote, the stuff you've done is really good. I like your work, and I think it'd be good in the company. And then after Sandy asked Jay for more money, Carmack came up to him again and was like, when I said your work was good, that was before I knew you'd ask Jay for more money. So I don't want you to think I told you your work was good in an attempt to get you to ask for less money. Like doing this. And the book actually says that Sandy's thoughts on this, I'm assuming they interviewed Sandy Peterson, and he was like, I don't think he knows like how humans think or feel, like referring to Carmack. And I think that's a pretty good way to put it. I think that. So another fun things happens at this time, and the book makes a big deal about going into it, and I think it deserves its own episode at some point, which is the game Myst came out. Myst, if you are not aware, is a first-person genre game, but it is not action-based. It is puzzle-based, and it's very slow and methodical. And essentially is brought up in the book because it is everything that the guys at id Software hated at the time.
They hated that it was probably so popular or getting very popular.
They hated that Myst was like the polar opposite of Doom, and it was really popular, and Doom was like fast and action-packed, and Myst was like slow, methodical, puzzle-solving. And so that's kind of brought up in the book as like, we got to get Myst, you know? It's like, we got to get him. So now that the engine was fast, it was time for the team to start working on all of the new features that they were putting in for Doom. So we're talking about all the weapons, you know, like the chainsaw, which is iconic, and also the BFG, which stands for Big Expletive Gun, or if you watch the movie Doom that we watched on our commentary, Bioforce Gun, which for the sake of having a clean podcast, we will call it the Bioforce Gun. We all know what that means.
Yeah, or maybe it's the best friend gun.
It's probably the best friend gun. That's probably what it is. Best friend gun. So, unlike in Wolfenstein 2, another cool aspect of Doom is if you lost your gun in Wolfenstein, you would just kind of get your pistol again if you ran out of ammo or anything like that. In Doom, you actually have to use your fists and punch stuff. And they did this by digitizing Kevin's hands throwing punches against a blue screen. And that's how they got the hands of the Doom Marine, of Doom Guy.
That's very cool.
So, Romero had never felt more like this was his game at this time. Like he's realizing now that this is everything he ever wanted in game design. This is like it's all of his inspirations combined into a game, and he is super excited for Doom to come out. And he actually starts designing levels with Sandy. And the cool thing about working with Sandy Peterson is their levels really complemented each other because they were so different. So Romero's levels when he designed Doom were raw, brutal. Like you'd have a fight with like one smaller enemy, only moments later to have like a room full of enemies pummeling you. Like it was just, it was super action based and focused. Meanwhile, Sandy, on the other hand, his rooms were more strategic. And so he would put like an exploding barrel in a place and being like, you have to hit that barrel at the exact right time to kill that enemy. Otherwise it's gonna be really hard for you. I should mention though, that the one critique that the id guys had about Sandy's levels were they were cosmetically ugly. Yeah, which I thought was weird, but everyone on the team loved the levels. They're just like good game design, but they just weren't as pretty as Romero's, I guess, is what was going on.
Well, if game's good, you know?
You know what? There's been a lot of ugly games that are really good. I think we can all, that would be a fun category. Ugliest games that were good. You know, I don't know if it's an episode, but maybe we do some sort of fake award show at some point. But in the fall of 1993, the big hype train started leaving the station when a press demo leaked online. And this caused all the diehard fans to come out of the woodwork and call id Software and email them asking for more info. And this is funny because while all the fans were doing this, Jay was having a lot of trouble trying to get attention from like bigger press outlets. Like it's really hard for their shareware game to get like covered in like a newspaper or like a bigger magazine. So what he did end up doing was he focused solely on distribution and marketing. And in that, I know marketing is like a general term, but it's really what he did is so he made a deal with a fulfillment house that would do all the orders for them. So Doom is being distributed and created. All the money is by id Software. Okay, they're getting all the profits for this one. They want to get out all the middlemen out of there. So part of getting Doom out there more and focusing on distribution is at the time when you worked with a retailer, for example, just like a Target, Walmart, whatever, okay? If you gave them shareware, they were expected to pay you, as in the author of this game, shareware, a small royalty whenever they made a sale. And so what Jay did with Doom is he said, no, the shareware is free and you guys collect all the profits on it. We don't want any of your money. And this like completely blew retailers' minds. Like, why are you doing this? But really what was happening was this made it so more potential customers came to id to buy the full game.
Yeah,
and then
makes
also
a lot of
the
sense.
retailers would advertise for them.
Yeah, because they were making 100% profit off of it. So they were like, of course, trying to push this Doom game everywhere. And so more shareware copies of the game sold means more full copies sold by id, right? That's brilliant. Makes a lot of sense.
It's a really good idea, and like it's clear to tell like he knew what he was doing when it came to marketing because it worked, obviously, as we all know. But so as this was going on too, as Jay was like planning how they were going to market the game and distribute it, Al Vacovius actually came out of the woodwork of Softdisk and was like, "Hey, you guys want to do a deal again? Like, do you want to like work?" I think it was a collection of their old games is what Al had in mind, because Softdisk was struggling at this time after the gang left, after Gamer's Edge kind of changed hands.
Bummer.
Yeah, and it's kind of mentioned in the book really quickly, but I thought it's important to know that they completely declined. Like, we all love Al, I think. I think we all love Al Vacovius. Okay?
Of course.
Yeah, he just got the bad hand dealt here in this case. Another thing that happens that's kind of like a story element of this is Romero's stepfather, John Schoonman, who they kind of didn't really get along when Romero was coming up in his like teenage years and working with computers, actually reached out to Romero and they got dinner. And it's like a really fun quote that I wanted to read. It says, quote, "I've been a bear sometimes, but I'm a man. And I remember telling you, if you were going to make your mark, you had to do business applications. I want you to know that I'm a man enough to admit that I was wrong. I think this is great, and I want you to know I was wrong," which I thought was nice.
Aww.
Like it's like a fun little, because the stepdad tension is very big in the first 2 chapters of this book. Lots of parent tension.
Yeah, he gets pretty. I mean, he like sort of encourages him playing games, and then when it starts to become this very serious, like, I'm gonna make my life these games, he was very much like, "No, you are not gonna make your life these games."
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of nice having that closure there, where his stepfather realizes, like, "I goofed. You're right.
Yeah.
Look at this. Video games, they're a thing."
That's nice.
So now they actually had just one final task leading up to the launch of Dune, and that was Halloween 1993. John Carmack walks into Romero's office while he's playing the game and says, "Hey, I'm going to start working on all the networking stuff. I'm all caught up. I'm going to start working on it, trying to get it so you can have 2 people in a game of Doom at one time using the internet." Oh, what an amazing idea, right? 2 weeks later, Carmack has it running. It's very quick. 2 computers were networked in the office. And it's actually funny because Romero like is just ecstatic. Like the minute he sees another person in third person on his screen, that's from someone an office away, and they just start playing constantly. And he even knew, like, this is a bigger moment than Dangerous Dave in copyright infringement. Like, people playing against each other, either cooperatively or competitively, because they did have a way you could play and you could fight monsters together, I guess. So this was like a big deal. So while the Doom hype train had left the station when that press leak came out, this really was like, wow.
This was the big time.
Like, yeah, we're going to have multiplayer for everyone. So the guys were getting all sorts of angry emails and questions by this point, too, from like diehard fans. And they actually got this poem that I wanted to read. This is in the book. I thought it was really funny. "'Twas the night before Doom, and all through the house I had set up my multiplaying networks, each with a mouse. The networks were strung with extra special care in the hopes that Doom soon would be there." I just
that's
thought that
very
was
nice.
Yeah. So people were like, it's kind of funny the mixed messaging they got. Like it's classic fandom. Like now, I think on the internet, when you see people love something, that they send really mean things to the people that make it. But these guys were doing it in 93. Okay. Which is big. So, all right. So launch day, right? It's Friday, December 10th. It is midnight and everyone is huddled around Jay's computer. And he's about to push the button to upload Doom to the University of Wisconsin FTP server, because they connected with a guy named David Data. I think that's how you say it. Data. It's Datta.
Yeah, 2 T's. Yeah. I don't know.
So,
it's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great name for a computer person, though. You know, when you
Yes.
think about it. So he's a computer engineer at the University of Wisconsin. They had like a kind of a friendship with him, I think, especially when their time when they were in Madison. And so they were like, we're going to put the like initial shareware for free up there, and people can start pulling it from there, and that can work. And the big problem was Jay pushed the button and nothing happened, because that site can only host 125 people, and there was no room for Jay to get in. So Jay called David and was like, all right, we got a plan. Okay, so David would extend the number of users bigger, like to 2126, so Jay could get in. And then he'd on the phone tell him, I'm doing it right now. And then Jay would just get right in. And that, like, they did that and it still didn't work. So they just couldn't get it uploaded. Finally, Jay went into the chat channel of this FTP server and said, quote, "Look, I'm sorry, but we have to kick you all off of the Wisconsin site because I can't get this uploaded. And your choices are either I kick you all off and I get this done, or it doesn't get uploaded at all. And everyone left, like, so fast. So Jay actually stuck around the office and uploaded the file to make sure the file like uploaded fully. It took about 30 minutes, and then the game was on the site. And at that moment, 10,000 people swamped the University of Wisconsin site.
Dang.
And the network buckled, and David's computer crashed. And David immediately called Jay and said, quote, "Oh my God, I've never seen anything like this."
Oh, that's how they knew they had a hit on their hands.
Yeah, you're crashing the university site for it. But you got the rest of it, Tyler. I'm excited to hear what happens next.
Yeah, so we're going to jump into the first part of Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is a pretty long chapter, so we'll only do part of it here. But so now we're into the last quarter of 1993. And the big game that year for consoles was Mortal Kombat. Remember Mortal Kombat?
Test your might.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that's the one.
The key of a Test Your Might song is heavy breathing. Okay, that's what's important.
So a long time ago, we talked about video game legislation on this podcast, like actually maybe years ago now. We've been doing this for a little while.
It's crazy. I haven't think about that.
We did a whole episode on video game legislation and the moral panic that happened in the early 90s. And remember how Doom was part of that? Well, we'll dive into that a little bit here because Doom is pretty big in the stuff that happens in those days. So like I said, we did a whole episode on it, so I'm not going to do all of that again, but I'll talk about the stuff that's relevant to Doom at least. So Democratic Senator Joe Lieberman was the one who got all riled up about it. Well, his chief of staff, Bill Anderson, got riled up about it, and so he went on to rile up Joe Lieberman. So again, we'll talk about what was so upsetting about Mortal Kombat here. So basically, that game was generally pretty violent, right? Lots of punching, kicking, blood, stuff like that. But that wasn't anything too new for games at the time. We had Street Fighter, which had a lot of punching and kicking. And, some people were a little bit wringing their hands about the violence in video games. And they're like, we don't know about this. But what Mortal Kombat did was put in some special moves that would let you do things like rip the spines out of your enemies or chop their heads off or any number of extremely bloody and gory things. It could be done to your enemies. And, so it was a little bit over the line, at least in those days. And so lawmakers got pretty upset about it. They were especially upset because the Sega Genesis version of the game outsold the Super Nintendo version. And the big difference there was that the Sega version was uncensored. So Nintendo didn't let the first Mortal Kombat have blood or guts in it or any of the finisher moves in quite a graphic fashion. But Sega did. And so the fact that it outsold the Super Nintendo version proved that that's what the kids wanted. And that was pretty distressing for lawmakers. But it did sell a lot of Sega Genesises because
it's great marketing for Sega.
Yeah, if you wanted Mortal Kombat, you wanted the good version with the blood and guts and stuff, and that was not on the Super Nintendo version. So you bought a Sega if you wanted
this is
that.
like console exclusivity before there was console exclusivity. That's what this was. It was like, you want the blood and guts, you can only get that on Sega.
Yeah. Well, it's like how Spider-Man is only on the PS4 version of Avengers, It's like that now.
Oh, Avengers. What a horrible mistake of a game that ended up being.
Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah, it is. It's a bummer.
Yep. But there were some other games that distressed Lieberman, like Night Trap and a light gun game called Lethal Enforcers. But being released right at this point in time, Doom was also in their crosshairs. They wanted to ban all those video games, which they saw as corrupting children. So nowadays, video games are considered like a medium for all ages, right? Kids play video games, adults play video games. There are games for adults, there are games for kids, and they're sort of segmented properly, right? But in the 80s and 90s, video games were thought of as children's toys. They were for kids, and you grew out of them. And so for them to offer experiences so explicit and violent was pretty scary for lawmakers and parents of the day, because basically, if a game came out that was super violent and bloody and gory, it was by default thought of as being marketed towards kids. And maybe it kind of was, to a certain extent. And so people were like, well, if these video games are going to be like this and they're going to be marketed towards kids, that's not great. I certainly remember my mom not allowing me to play games that were above my age and rating. I still played them. Of course, we all did. But I wasn't allowed to have a T-rated game until I was 13 or an M-rated game until I was 17. My parents were pretty strict on that. Did your parents have rules on that, Mike?
Oh, yeah. I actually, so this kind of hits us. I grew up in Eagle River, Alaska, which is a tiny suburb of Anchorage, and the next door neighbors, it was like grandparents for some people, and we would go there a lot and like hang out with them because they were cool people, you know. And they had their kids, and they had a 3-year-old that played Mortal Kombat on Sega and like all the time.
Wow.
Like,
holy moly. That's a little young for some Mortal Kombat.
Yeah. He was like, he could barely even talk, and he would like play and like smash the buttons, and there would just be like gore everywhere. And I was like 8, I think, watching this kid, and I was like, this seems too young, right? I mean, I'm not a supervisor, but this seems weird, you know? Like, and I think the parents just didn't know at the time, because I am 100%, by the way, on board that video games don't cause kids to become murderers. I think that is a myth, and yada yada. I love video games, da da da. But I was like sitting there while this 3-year-old kid was like pulling the spine out of a fighter and being like, "This doesn't seem okay, right? I'm a kid."
I mean, there is a level of like a certain amount of age appropriateness, right? Like, I don't think they cause people to become murderers, but I also am not going to hand like Postal 2 to a 4-year-old, right? Like,
exactly. And my mom was 100% like, I could play teen games, but I couldn't play like mature games. Or if we did, like, for example, we played GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, and we'd always turn paintball mode on. Like, that was the rule.
Like it made a difference. Like, it mattered.
Yeah, like that. Now they just have rainbow blood. Like, I don't see the problem with that. But I mean, I couldn't even watch The Simpsons as a kid. So
same actually.
We have very similar childhoods, you know?
But and there was also, like, because video games were considered to just be children's toys, like, the reason a 3-year-old could play Mortal Kombat at that point in time is because parents weren't even thinking about it. They were like, it's a video game, it's fine, right? Here you go. And they don't even know what's going on in it because they just assume it's a kid's toy.
Yeah, I didn't even think about how, like, socially that has changed so much, you know, since we were children, essentially. But another thing to point out about this, too, is if you want to know more about this kind of stuff, there is one on that High Score documentary. They do a whole episode on this Sega,
I
Nintendo
still need to watch that.
Video game censorship stuff. So, that's we're a free podcast, and we are very open with saying that you can do and listen to whatever you want, and you should go watch that if you're more interested in this. They cover it really well. So,
So the book goes on a little bit to talk about how this wasn't the first time there was like a moral panic, right? Pulp novels were basically from the devil in the late 1800s, and it got everybody all up in a tizzy. In the 50s, we had Elvis, who was, of course, corrupting the youth. The 80s had metal music that was supposedly making people kill themselves. I mean, pinball machines were banned in New York until the 70s, right? So, like, this wasn't the first time something like this happened. And I feel like it's like every decade or so, something comes along. It gets parents and lawmakers all riled up in arms. And in the early 90s, that was video games. So, on December 9th, Joe Lieberman completed his hearings on video game violence and declared that the industry had 1 year to come up with some kind of way to police themselves, or the government would do it for them. Well, on December 10th, Doom was released to the public in 1993. The day after that, which I love it. I think it perfectly encapsulates the early 90s and video games, and it perfectly encapsulates like id Software and Doom too. It's like they released it almost as this like FU to the government, right? Like, which is perfectly on brand for both id and for Doom. Like, to be like, oh, you're going to make it so that we have to do this thing. Well, the very next day we're going to drop this incredibly gory and violent game that did not receive a rating in its original PC form. And
now when you say FU, you mean friendship you, right?
Of course.
Okay. That's important to note. Definitely.
Yeah. Yep. I love it. And so did the people. Doom was hyped up pretty hard before release, since it was the next big thing from the creators of Wolfenstein, and because they had leaked that incomplete version of the game that was meant for the press, remember? So people were pretty stoked, and they went out and they bought it in droves. They got that shareware copy, and they put in their orders for the full thing, and they played multiplayer. They played so much multiplayer. People failed their classes because they were too busy playing Doom instead of studying. That is how amazing and like revolutionary this game was. And I mean, people failing classes because of video games isn't anything new, but this was like something special. People were really prioritizing playing Doom over things that maybe they shouldn't have been. Yeah.
I would say this is almost the first. You know?
Maybe, yeah. Even Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails was skipping the after parties from their concerts to sit alone at his computer and play Doom like a freaking nerd.
Way to go, Trent Reznor, you nerd.
Yeah, he will come back later in this story, I think. But but not yet. We're still on Doom.
Also, I should say, too, I guess people did skip classes to go to arcades, so that can't be true. But maybe, like, multiplayer with friends. This is the first time people would, like, have LAN parties and ignore their classes. Gotta love that.
And look, if a person wants to do something else besides study, they will find something else to do, right? Like,
definitely.
I don't want to say like Doom caused people to fail, because if it wasn't Doom, it would have been something else for many of those people. But
I have an opinion tangent to ask you that I meant to ask you earlier. So, do you think that since video games in the 90s was the thing that's like a big upheaval with society, I think now it's got to be social media. Right.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. People are sort of starting to kind of figure out like, hey, how does this actually affect us? And is it even good for us? Like, yeah, we get that instant dopamine hit of like new content, but is it good for us in the long run? And like, we're still kind of figuring it out.
But all signs point to it's not good for you.
Yeah, probably not great. Everything in moderation, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I wouldn't say like, well, we need to ban social media. It would be like we need to figure out healthy ways to engage with this stuff, because there's good stuff there and then there's bad stuff. So
yeah, and I would also argue that the ESRB did a lot more. Like it pretty much shut down this conversation of like, and because now it's like, well, the game's mature, I'm going to freak out. Well, it says mature on the box. You can't get mad, and it's not your fault. I mean, it's not the video game developers, it's the parents' fault at this point. So
yeah, and every now and then you hear about like, oh man, GTA 5, most violent game ever to come out. Kids are playing this, and it's like that's a parenting failure if kids are playing games they shouldn't be, because a parent can look at the box and they should be in control of what their kids consume, right? Like to a certain extent. Like I said, I played video games at other people's houses, but like that's kind of also part of being a kid, is like figuring out ways to get around that stuff.
Yeah. Also, like whenever I see a news story now that's like the most violent video game, I'm like, slow news day, huh? That's what you're talking about? Like, yep. You can't think of something better?
That's what we got here. But so many people were playing Doom in multiplayer that they were clogging up the networks around the globe, because remember, they could connect to each other from on one part of the network to another. It didn't go over the internet initially, I think, but that was pretty quickly added in later. But they clogged the networks up, basically. Like, so many servers crashed under the weight of all the people trying to get a hold of the shareware version of Doom. Carnegie Mellon threatened to cut off network access to folks playing Doom on their networks because it was finals time and the computers just slowed to a crawl. It was causing problems at a lot of places just because of how popular it was. If it wasn't causing a problem because people were clogging up the lines downloading the game, it was clogging up the lines people playing the game with each other. And it was basically like, a lot of computer systems became unusable because of it. And I was going to say, it came out in December, so it was like finals time, like just the perfect time for this to be happening, right?
Yeah, I was going to say Carnegie Mellon essentially was like, play single player. Like, get off the internet and play single player if you want to play Doom.
Yeah, play by yourself. Set up a LAN party. Bring your friends over. But don't use our network to play Doom with each other. And so people loved it, though. It was very popular. And the critics agreed. Doom was way better than Wolfenstein 3D. And everyone loved Wolfenstein. They loved the speed. They loved the weapons, the carnage, the demon destroying, the labyrinth levels. They loved destroying everything in their path to some heavy metal music. And it was only available on the PC at the time, which was kind of a nice booster shot for the PC, because I think we talked about this last time, but there's like been this sort of undercurrent since the 90s and even into the 2000s. I think less so nowadays, but like PC gaming is about to be destroyed by consoles. And back in those days, people thought maybe that was true, especially because consoles were starting to get some 3D capabilities that PCs didn't have, until Doom came out and proved PCs could do it too.
Yeah, and they're going to end up doing it better, you know?
Yep. And like you said, that shareware model that they had gone with worked too. So the book says that even though it's estimated that only 1% of people who played the shareware actually paid to get the full version, it was still bringing in $100,000 a day. So that's some pizza money right there, right? That's crazy.
That is bananas. Hotcakes, gangbusters, everything.
Yeah. Yep. Earlier in the book, I can't remember if we talked about this or not, but id joked that they wanted to be the number one cause of productivity loss in the world. And it's pretty fair to say that might have been true, right? They certainly were losing productivity at their own office. They played the game all day long, all hours of the day. Some days they didn't do any work at all, especially John Romero and Sean Green, who did almost nothing except play Doom after the game came out. And they were talking a lot of smack. They were hitting the walls. They were breaking stuff. We're a family-friendly podcast, so I won't repeat the words that Romero said to Sean Green when they were playing Deathmatch, but they were pretty colorful.
You're going to have to buy the book, you know?
Yeah, you have to buy the book and read exactly what he said there.
Or get an audiobook and see if someone else will read it to you. That's the workaround.
That's a great way to do it too. They were also just destroying the office. They were breaking keyboards, chairs, monitors. They stuck those stupid AOL discs in the wall, like they were throwing them and hitting them in the wall. You remember those? The AOL discs?
Oh, AOL discs. Oh, my heart swoons for this very inefficient technology.
It worked for AOL. That's a whole nother topic for another day.
It worked super well.
It worked very well for them, but they were deep in that marketing campaign. But at this point in time, they were still handing out floppy disks for free, I think. So those ones stuck in the wall pretty well. So yeah, the floppies were bad, but they got really terrible when they moved on to CDs. Like that's when the inboxes or mailboxes were just filling up with CDs. I swear we were getting them every single day when we came home from school. I was just always
look at all this
AOL
internet
CDs.
We have. We have so many internets.
50 free hours. I was getting 50 free hours every day. I was like, man, I'm still operating. I haven't paid for internet since. I'm still operating on my on those AOL discs. So it's really slow. I still have to dial in. It's kind of a pain. But you know what? I'm not going to pay for internet, and that you're just going to have to be okay with that.
We do a lot of workarounds to make this podcast work.
Yeah, it's tough. But the office was in shambles. Romero at one point locked himself in the office on accident in his office, and Carmack used a battle axe that he owned and had just at the office to get him out. And they left the door in the hallway for months after that, like this destroyed door.
Didn't it say it was like a $5,000 custom-made battle axe?
Yeah. It was a custom battle axe.
If 20-year-old me got $1 million. That's 100% what this is.
Well,
I love it
that's
so
exactly
much.
what happened, because 20-year-old them got $1 million and bought a battle axe.
I love it.
Which is it's absolutely insane to me. So all this to say, Doom was crushing it, and the guys were riding that high for a long time after the game came out. And, to a certain extent, they should feel good about it, right? Maybe not destroy the office feel good, but I think it's okay to feel good after accomplishing something and maybe spend a few days on vacation, playing some games with each other, having a good time. I think that's totally fine. Just don't destroy the office. But at this point, they'd become the kings of shareware. The game was flying off the shelves in retail stores, mostly because they didn't have to actually distribute it themselves. We talked about this earlier, but the retail stores were making their own copies of the game. They could sell it for whatever price they wanted. But to get the rest of the game, players would have to pay id. So that first episode kind of advertised itself. Knee Deep in the Dead is what it was called. Now the crew wanted to put the game in stores for real, and they were going to do it with the help of a man named Ron Chamowitz. So Ron Chamowitz was pretty experienced in both computers and the music industry. He launched the first Hispanic record label in Miami, which was the first to sign Gloria Estefan and Julio Iglesias. His company, Good Times, was also responsible for Workout Tapes by Fonda. That's my Sir Mix-a-Lot impression.
That was really good.
Thanks. Anyway, they had a pretty good track record of picking winners when it came to selling stuff in the U.S. He had a deal with Walmart, and he had expanded the company to be a company called Good Times Interactive, or GTI. You may have heard of them. They now operate just as Atari Inc., which is not the same company, the same Atari that made consoles in the 80s, but it kind of is the same company. Atari has a weird history with its name. But Good Times Interactive was that video game publishing arm of Good Times Home Video, which specialized in releasing video versions of public domain stories like Aladdin and The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, released conveniently at the same time those Disney movies were released. So they were a little bit tricky there, getting people to buy movies that may or may not have actually been the Disney movie that their customers were looking for. There's probably a whole story there, but that's outside the scope of this podcast.
What a wonderful time to be alive. That you go to the store thinking you're buying Beauty and the Beast, and it's just some weird live action version.
Yeah, or it's like a weird animated version that's like not quite the same story. But like grandparents were tricked into that stuff, right? They're like, oh, my kid won't stop talking about Beauty and the Beast. I'm going to buy this for them.
That still happens all the time.
Yeah. And then the kid is probably really polite about it. Like, oh, gee, thanks. This is definitely the movie I wanted. Hopefully they're polite about it.
I hope so. Otherwise, that kid's a monster.
Yeah, but that's a whole other story for a whole other podcast. GTI, though, needed a game to sell. They'd done this weird, like, Richard Simmons thing and a Fabio screensaver, but nothing had really set the world on fire. They had also done this thing where they took games released by EA and Broderbund and re-released them. So remember, like, those shelves of the stores at, like, Target, where you would see, like, CDs of like really old games or like packs of old games for really cheap, and they were like they weren't in the traditional big PC box. They were like smaller. Do you remember those shelves that had those games on it?
They still have those.
Really?
They still have I've been to Targets and Walmarts that have like the Bejeweled Classic collection.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like 10 versions of Bejeweled. And then they also have like interactive games that are like Myst-esque, like
Yeah.
that's still very much a thing. And I actually looked up one of these recently because I was like, this is like a dungeon crawler game, like D&D. And I was like, I was at a Target and I Googled it and it was on Steam. You could buy the game on Steam, but it was this really terrible box art disc version at like a Target I was blown away by it because I'd never seen that,
Wow. Yeah. Well, anyway, GTI used to do those things for a while and that did it okay. They could kind of repackage them and sell these games that people had kind of already bought before. They did stuff like that. But at this point in time, they were looking for a new game to publish. They wanted to continue publishing those budget games, but you know what's better than licensing an old game from an existing publisher? Making your own games, getting a new game from a new developer. But GTI would also be there to kind of lend a hand. So Ron Chamowitz went to id several times because id didn't have any connections to retail anymore. They weren't working with Apogee, so they didn't really have a way to get Doom into stores. So eventually, Ron Chamowitz convinced them that, yeah, shareware was good, it was okay, but a brand new title could sell like gangbusters and hotcakes in his hands. He wanted a game we'll just call, for the sake of argument here, we'll call it Doom 2, right? And the guys at id played it cool. They had terms. They wanted full creative control and ownership of their IP, and they wanted people to know that it was id making the game, not GTI. So they wanted like prominent on the box that this was an id game, not GTI. So Ron agreed, and he set a $2 million budget for Doom 2 advertising. That's insane, because that was more money than it had taken id to develop all of the games it had ever developed combined. And they were going to spend that much money just on advertising. So, with that, it was time to move on to Doom 2. And that's where we're going to leave this episode. And we'll move on in Chapter 10 on the next one.
Oh, man. Tyler, what you been playing?
Well, I've been playing. I picked up Mario 3D All-Stars on Friday. So I've been making my way through Super Mario 64 a little bit. Although I think I'm going to skip straight to Galaxy because I really want to play Galaxy. And I love that game. And I only played it once back when it was brand new. So I'm like ready to go back. It's like 13 years old now, probably. So I'm like ready to experience it again. I'm very excited. So I've been playing that. I've been playing World of Warcraft. I just hit level 90 on my Night Elf Rogue. So making it through the levels, just queuing up for dungeons, getting lots of levels. And that's pretty much it, I think. Oh, we've been playing Halo Wars too. We got back on that train. We have about 3 missions left there. So that's exciting.
Yeah, that might have to happen later tonight. I got to say though, okay, so I took a little break from WoW this week. So I finally beat the Outer Worlds. And I beat Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. And I'm calling it beat because I did all the sections in the opening menu or whatever. I haven't beat it with all the skaters, haven't gotten all the challenges. That's way too much time. I feel like I've sufficiently beaten Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. But my copy of 3D All-Stars is in the mail. It doesn't get here till Friday. But what did come in the mail is my Nintendo Ring Fit Adventure. I am going to be playing this workout game this week. And I'm super amped about it. It's like the Pilates ring is actually like really high quality. Like you can bend it and bring it. It's like good tension to it. And I'm super excited to play. I watched some videos on it. It looks really cool. It looks like it's actually like a decent workout, So yeah, I'm trying to trick my brain into working out with the power of video games.
Just make it into a game.
Exactly.
Dude,
so
Apple did it with Apple Watch, just getting people to fill up their rings. Like, man, some people are really on that.
Oh yeah. I mean, I will give a full report on next episode about
Very
it.
excited.
But I got to the point where I was like calibrating the wheel and stuff this morning, and then I had to go start working on yard work in my yard. No big deal, but putting down grass seed. This is not Codex history of grass seed though, so we'll move on. We have an email. Do you want to read the email?
Sure. I can pull it up here.
Okay.
I got it. It's from Old Man Ryan. He says, "Sup, my dudes, Old Man Ryan yet again. Figured I should chime in like a father figure and ask, are you winning, son? Because we all know you two have always been. Loving the side quest episodes to keep things fresh. Don't forget to turn them in for the XP. Thanks, Old Man Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. I don't want to call him Old Man. I feel so weird calling him Old Man Ryan, although he's really embraced it. He
really has, yeah.
If you want to know more about Old Man Ryan, I strongly suggest you join the Discord group because that man gets more cheap video game nostalgia than I have ever seen in my entire life. He has so many old consoles, and he takes pictures of all of them so you can see his collection. If you want to join the Discord, it's on my Twitter profile. It's pinned at the top. Or if you email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com, I will just send you a link to it if you want to join. Thank you so much for the email, Ryan. And yeah, feel free to send us any emails if you want. If you like the side quests, please let us know. We're going to try to like break it up, I feel like, every once in a while on the IDS train. Because
we still got a ways left to go on this book.
Yeah, we got a while to go, I think. We're probably about halfway right now. So, I mean, we're going to definitely break it up with different things. And the people on the Discord have given us so many great ideas. Like Vaporware was 100% an idea from the Discord. So, that was really fun to do. We got one new review I need to read. Do you want me to read the review, Tyler?
Yeah, exciting.
All right. 5 stars from Seaman the Ogre. I love it. My friend and I both getting Switch. Oh, that's actually a question for us, too. My friend and I are both getting Switches, and I was wondering, what are some good Switch games that you recommend? I love the podcast. You guys never disappoint me. High five emoji. Breath of the Wild, obviously.
Yep.
But
can't go wrong there.
I really, really had fun playing Super Mario Odyssey. Like, I really enjoyed it.
That one did not capture me the way other Mario games have.
It captured me so heavy, and I don't know if I was just really feeling it at the time, but that was great. I know you, Tyler, have a game you love called Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle.
Yes, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle is a little bit of a hidden gem. Love that one. All the Doom games are on there, so that's worth checking out. Fire Emblem 3 Houses, or as I like to call it, Fire Emblem 3 Houses. Is pretty good. There's actually a lot of good free games on there too, like free to play stuff. Dauntless is pretty cool. So yeah, I also highly recommend the version of World of Final Fantasy that's on, because that just is nice.
Nice.
I'm like going through my games.
I have a couple too. Golf Story is really fun if you have nostalgia for the old Mario Golf for Game Boy. That was like an RPG. That's really great. There's a game called Wargroove. If you're a big fan of Advance Wars, that's what Wargroove is. Just it's updated and it's really fun. Also, Untitled Goose Game is on there too. It's on everywhere, but if that's a Game Pass title. So if you have Xbox, just play it on Game Pass. I bought it and then it was put on Game Pass like a week later. But it was fun.
It happens.
Oh, Overcooked. Overcooked 2.
Oh, yeah. Overcooked is great.
That's a fun party game with friends. Definitely play Overcooked. And then I feel like there's more, but the 3D collection that we just got. Oh, that was what I was going to say. If you buy the online, it's only $20 for the year, and you get an SNES and an NES emulator, and they're constantly throwing games on them. They get new games. And Donkey Kong Country was just put on the SNES emulator.
Yeah, Donkey Kong Country 2 comes out soon, or maybe it's already out.
Oh yeah, man. Switch is great. I am playing on PC now and like Xbox occasionally, but Switch is so good. It's so golden. Mm-hmm. It's a great time for video games right now. So thank you for the review, Seaman the Ogre, and anyone wants to review us on Apple Podcasts or if you listen to us, if they have a review. If they don't have a review, like if you're listening on Spotify, you can just tell your friends about us. That's cool. Or you could just keep listening and not tell anyone about it. It's your secret. And no one has to know, and that's fine too. But I think that's it. We're gonna continue. I think next week we're gonna continue with id. We're gonna keep this party rolling. But then maybe a week after that, I don't know. We'll put something new in there for you. So thanks so much for listening. You want to say bye to everybody, Tyler?
Yeah, goodbye, everybody.